protect workers' rights, a Labour deal that protects our consumer protections and our environmental protections, one that has that frictionless trade that the Prime Minister promised but has failed to deliver.
I'm sorry to jump in again, but...
There are just a few days before Parliament breaks for Christmas. Some want a no-confidence vote in the Commons. Labour says it will try and force a vote on Theresa May's Brexit plan. After a rollercoaster period, there could be more to come. Nick Eardley, BBC News.
A young boy who was rescued from a house fire which killed 2 people in Nottinghamshire has now died. The blaze in Collingham broke out yesterday morning. A girl aged 8 and a woman of 33 died yesterday. A man remains seriously ill in hospital, as Katie Austin now reports.
A community in mourning. Prayers were said during today's service at All Saints Church to remember 3 tragic deaths in the same family. Firefighters were called yesterday morning to a house fire which claimed the lives of a 33-year-old woman and her 8-year-old daughter. Today, Nottinghamshire Police said her 5-year-old son, who was rescued and taken to hospital, has also died. A man believed to be the children's father is still in hospital with serious injuries, and a 53-year-old thought to be their grandmother escaped unhurt. People living nearby have described trying to break into the house during the fire in an effort to help. The cause of the blaze is still being investigated.
I think we are all aware.
All Saints Church will now be open every day until Christmas, so residents of the close-knit village of Collingham can leave prayers or messages of condolence for a mother and her 2 children. Katie Austin, BBC News.
Environmental groups have said that a deal struck at a UN conference in Poland does not go far enough in tackling climate change. Delegates from nearly 200 countries reached agreement on how to implement the landmark Paris Climate Accord and outline plans for a common rule book on cutting carbon emissions. But the commitments are not legally binding. Here's our science editor, David Schuckman.
Applause and relief that 2 long weeks of negotiation were over, and that a deal to try to tackle climate change has at last emerged.
In a moment when there are many conflicts in the world, many disagreements amongst countries, to find agreement by unanimity, by consensus, to fight global warming is very good news.
Most significant is a set of rules for how countries cut their emissions of the gases warming the planet. That was sorted. On finance for developing countries to help them adapt and go green, some progress, but they say not enough. And on promises of much deeper cuts in emissions, which many say are needed, that'll have to be discussed later. Many diplomats are relieved to have made it this far, but some developing countries, faced with the threat of rising sea levels, say the deal does not go nearly far enough and that bolder steps are needed.
We got 12 years. The decision here today doesn't really solve anything. I think we got to do practical things. We got to cut down the emission drastically in terms of emissions. So I think working together, I think we can achieve what really we want.
The real test is whether the deal actually leads to less of this, warming gases entering the atmosphere. And so far, all the talk over the past 25 years hasn't managed to achieve that. David Schuckman, BBC News.
Bad weather and an increasing trend to buy online are being blamed for shoppers staying away from the high street on what is usually the busiest weekend before Christmas. Retail experts say footfall across the UK yesterday was down almost 10% compared with the same time last year. Here's our business correspondent, Joe Miller.
A bruising year has left many of Britain's large retailers fighting for survival and more than ever banking on a busy festive season. But heavy rain heaped more misery on the high street yesterday and prompted many to stay dry and shop online.
There was a sliver of hope for retailers last week when footfall rose 6% on the year before. But figures from analytics firm Springboard show a drop of 7% on Saturday if you include retail parks and shopping centres, and a drop of 9% on the high street, adding further gloom to one of the worst Novembers on record.
Analysts see few bright spots ahead.
We've seen consumer confidence drop, we've seen costs increase, and in general I think people are very nervous about spending.
The British Retail Consortium predicts that sales will pick up in the next few days as more people rush to buy last-minute food and presents. The fate of one chain in particular may rest on such a surge. Debenhams, which lost a record £500 million this financial year, has rebuffed an injection of cash from the self-styled saviour of the High Street, Mike Ashley. His company Sports Direct, which rescued House of Fraser, had a stark warning for its wounded rival.
We've put this offer in to invest another 40 million, and it really is kind of the electric shock to wake them up to what is probably the last chance saloon.
Some suspect Mr. Ashley, who is already Debenhams' largest shareholder, wants the first claim on its assets if it collapses, an allegation his company rejects. But while Debenhams and other struggling chains might just be able to afford to keep the billionaire at bay, neither they nor Mr. Ashley's retail empire can afford a disappointing Christmas. Joe Miller, BBC News.
Now, it's the BBC's Sports Personality of the Year award in Birmingham tonight, but as the format has changed this year, we won't know who's actually been nominated until the programme itself this evening. Well, our sports correspondent Joe Wilson is in Birmingham for us this afternoon. Joe.
Yeah, Ben, you know sport's all about drama and unpredictability, so I quite like the fact that we're standing here this close to the evening, still officially guessing who the nominees are for the big prize. We know this evening's show will feature some of the great sporting moments of the year, and indeed this year people have been voting for their favourite sporting moment. The shortlist there is Tyson Fury getting off the canvas in his recent world title fight, Alistair Cook making 100 in his final test match, Tiger Woods resuming his golfing career with a big win, and that victory in the penalty shootout for England's footballers, and indeed at the start of the year the Commonwealth Gold for England's netball players. We also know there will be a special award this evening for young Billy Monger, who this year resumed his race driving career despite appalling injuries. Of course, sport is about winners and about losers, Ben, but somewhere it must also be about the triumph of the human spirit, and I think we will get a strong sense of that here in Birmingham this evening. But right now the nominees officially, I can confirm, are still a mystery.
We'll wait and see. Thank you so much, Joe Wilson there. And you can see more on all of today's stories on the BBC News channel. The next news on BBC One is at 5:35. Goodbye for now.
The moments that define the year. Review 2018, all next week on the BBC News channel.
Sometimes being in the driving seat is... She stayed in school. She's a... This isn't just playing sports. This is... The simple act of standing, and you're a... You don't need superpowers to change the world. 100 Women, a season of inspiring and challenging stories on the BBC.
Hello again, you're watching the BBC News channel with me, Ben Brown. It's 11 minutes past 1 exactly. Now then, let's bring you up to date with the latest on Brexit, because this morning senior government figures have rejected the idea of another referendum, with one of them, Liam Fox, warning that it would perpetuate rather than heal divisions. But behind the scenes, some MPs are trying to forge cross-party initiatives, and one of a small number of Labour MPs who met the Cabinet Secretary David Lidington last week was Ben Bradshaw.
We thought it was very important that the government at the highest level know that this deal is not going to go through, that they understand the depth and severity of this crisis. They get on with bringing the deal back to Parliament next week and get it voted on so that we can then move on to the next stage. We also wanted to make sure that the government didn't think that there were enough votes on the Labour benches to get through this kind of Norway-type halfway house Brexit, and that it really did need to move quickly to end the uncertainty that's doing so much damage to our economy.
So you think there are enough MPs who would support the idea of another referendum, do you?
I'm confident that once this deal is out of the way, once the idea of a general election, which of course I would like to see, but I think is unlikely because of the Fixed-Term Parliament Act, once that is off the agenda as well, then I think, yes, when we're facing the choice, which it will be, between the disaster of crashing out over the cliff with no deal and another referendum, I think that will be the only option or solution that will command a Commons majority.
What would you say to all the people who may be screaming at their TV now, saying we've already had a referendum, we've had a people's vote, and the answer was leave, get out of Europe, just get on with it?
Well, I would ask them what their answer would be to getting us out of this gridlock. And I think it's very important that people focus on what crashing out over a cliff with without a deal would mean. There are some people who seem to think that it means the status quo. So it's really important that people focus on the detail of what that would mean. It would be absolutely catastrophic for our economy, and I think there'd be many other serious repercussions as well.
When you say it would be catastrophic, a lot of Leave campaigners would say that is Project Fear. You're absolutely exaggerating the difficulties of a no-deal Brexit.
Well, it's the government's own assessment of what would happen in those circumstances. And anyway, there's no way Parliament would ever allow it to happen. 80–90% of MPs understand how catastrophic it would be. So if the government itself doesn't take no deal off the table, I think Parliament will for it. And democracy does not stand still at one point in time, Ben. And I think the Brexit that we have now before us in Theresa May's deal is very, very different from the Brexit that was sold to the voters 2.5 years ago, including to many of those voters who voted Leave, who don't like her deal. So her deal is dead, and we've got to find some way as a country of moving forward.
Ben Bradshaw, the Labour MP, talking to me a little earlier on. Now then, after 2 weeks of negotiations, delegates at the United Nations Climate Conference in Poland have reached agreement on how to enforce promised cuts to carbon emissions. And I've been discussing that deal with Michael Grubb, who's Professor of Energy and Climate Change at UCL, and asked him about the significance of this agreement.
Well, I think in a way the most important thing about this agreement is that it was struck, and it was struck against a difficult political background for global negotiations in general, and obviously particular scepticism in some quarters about climate change and willingness to pursue the Paris Agreement. The expectations, the agenda for this conference at one level never looked terribly demanding. It was really about agreeing the rules for implementing the Paris Agreement, particularly around transparency, the reporting processes. And actually, I think what I hear is a number of people, and I think myself also, feel that what has emerged is maybe better than was expected going in. And there were some difficult moments, even at the beginning of the conference, around adoption of key scientific reports. But those have been overcome. They have come out with a global deal. It does clearly and most significantly align countries on the same reporting process and timescales, rich and poor alike, which is also a symbolically very important step.
And it commits those countries to cutting emissions, but it doesn't really force them to. There's no punishment if they don't.
Well, one of the key features, frankly, over the last almost 10 years now, has been the move away from the previous structure, which had legally binding limits on rich countries. It forces countries to come forward with their offer, and countries promise to make best endeavours to deliver those offers. It also establishes strong global goals. Now, what the governments have acknowledged is their current offers, frankly, ain't enough compared to the goals that they've agreed for global emissions. So what this latest agreement also does is officially fire the starting gun on the next round of what those national commitments should look like.
That was Professor Michael Grubb there, Professor of Energy and Climate Change. For some time, police have been warning of the growth of large urban gangs who use violence and extortion to trap vulnerable teenagers into helping them deal drugs in rural areas. Well, now Dorset Police has become one of the first forces in the country to create a specialist unit to tackle the growth of so-called county lines drug dealing. Sam Everett reports.
They carry big like machete knives, knives out of my cupboard. They'd be lying around the flat all over the place.
John was a victim of a County Lines drugs gang.
They use their mobile phones to phone you, to try and force their way into your place, offering you money or drugs.
So what is County Lines? It's an operation run by gangs in large urban areas. They set up phone lines to take orders for drugs, then they coerce runners to take the drugs across counties, using teenagers to avoid detection. In smaller towns, local dealers take over a vulnerable person's home, often by force, and bring the runners to it. The drugs can then be sold and distributed from a secure location.
So it's difficult when you're caught up in that sort of thing to sort of say no. You want them out, but they just seem to stick around. Please go kind of thing. They're ruthless people. Let my family down, myself down. Yeah, I'm worried that they come back.
John is now off drugs and received help to get rid of the gang. But there's hundreds of other County Lines still in operation.
The lady who is the tenant there is now deceased, but the property has possibly been taken over by Class A drug users.
This flat in Weymouth was found littered with needles and heroin.
Located nearby was this, a knife by the side of the bed.
Teenagers from a London drugs gang were found inside. They were detained and investigated further. The woman living there was a vulnerable drug user. As suspected, the gang had taken over the home after her mum had died.
Those persons that are living at those properties, sometimes they're vulnerable through Class A misuse themselves, other times it could be through mental health, could be through poor health, physical disabilities.
Andy is part of one of the first specialist units set up to tackle County Lines, using tactics designed to combat this highly organised form of crime. Dedicated officers are stationed in towns where it's become a problem. They carry out intelligence-led surveillance on drug gangs and track their efforts to recruit local runners. They also identify vulnerable people in danger of being targeted and offer them support.
Even after that person has lost everything, it may be that they've had their children taken away, they've lost their house, the drug gangs will continue to exploit them.
The National Crime Agency estimate there are at least 1,500 other lines operating across England and Wales. A serious problem new task forces want to end. Sam Everett, BBC News.
A fundraising campaign by Chester Zoo to raise £50,000 after a fire which destroyed much of the roof covering its monsoon forest area has reached its target in just over 24 hours. Chester Zoo said yesterday was one of the toughest days in its long history and thanked the remarkable efforts of the zoo team and the emergency services, which meant the fire was extinguished as quickly as possible. Well, in a statement released this morning, the zoo said, "We are devastated. We were unable to save some of our insects, frogs, fish and small birds located near to the outbreak of the fire. It is absolutely heartbreaking to lose any animal, especially when conservationists have worked so hard to breed these wonderful species." 11.7 million people watched the final of Strictly Come Dancing last night on BBC One. The documentary presenter Stacey Dooley won the series with her professional partner Kevin Clifton, who had been a losing finalist on 4 previous occasions. Here's David Sillito.
It's the final!
The Strictly final. 4 couples, 3 dances, and from the very beginning, it was Kathy Roberts, the former Pussycat Doll, who set the standard. The big lift from Dirty Dancing was flawless.
10.
The score, perfect 10s. And those 40s kept coming. This athletic show dance on a raised and revolving platform.
I personally feel that you've stretched yourself beyond limits. You've learned techniques that you were not familiar with ever before. You have brought to this show a life, a style, and I truly am grateful to you.
The
course, Craig did try to find a fault.
I had a small problem with your right toe, darling.
You are kidding!
But then I decided to get over myself.
Not a point was dropped all night. But matching those scores, dance after dance, was Faye Tozer.
Come on along and listen to the lullaby.
This Hollywood glitz in high heels on a very high top hat. And at the end of this routine to fever, it was perfect tens across the board.
What an end of a journey. Wow.
Wow, this is really high. But when it comes to a journey to go from being a non-dancer to doing this, YouTuber Joe Sugg was more than holding his own. Ending with a Charleston.
You are the biggest surprise of this series. I mean, from a marathon night of dances tonight, you have just got stronger and stronger. And it's an extraordinary amount of work that you have put in, and it has paid off. You are a star on this dance floor.
For TV journalist Stacey Dooley, it began with a foxtrot. And then an explosive show dance. Everything was thrown at it. The crowd loved it. Bruno tried to describe it as her greatest hits. But Craig...
I wasn't that keen on the dance. I'm only being honest.
It was the lowest score of the night. And even at the end of a Paso Doble described as having power and passion, she was in 4th place. But this isn't up to the judges. All that matters is what the public thinks. And they saw it rather differently.
Stacey
And even more emotional was her professional dance partner, Kevin Clifton. After 5 finals, his first Strictly victory. So there it is, the winner of this year's Glitterball Trophy, Stacey Dooley. David Sillito, BBC News.
All right, let's get a full round of all sport now. Catherine's here with that. Were you watching Strictly last night, Kat?
I was. I had to go to bed early before BBC Breakfast, but I managed to whiz through it, skipping all the judges' bits and all those smushy VTs about Strictly journeys. Just wanted to see the dancing.
OK, and were you a Stacey fan?
I was. I thought the right winner won. At the end of the day, it's a popularity contest, isn't it? And
it is
she was
indeed.
Brilliant.
Yeah. All right, you'd be good on it. You should do it one day.
I don't think it's for me. I'll go after you, Ben. Right, let's start with the football, shall we? Get back to business. Manchester United travelling to Anfield to face Liverpool later. United go into this match in 6th, 16 points behind their bitter rivals, while Jurgen Klopp's side are looking to go back to the top of the table later.
We never thought before a game, only because we have a few good results in the past at home or whatever, that it will be easy in the next game. That's not the mood you can win football games. We are angry on Sunday, and we will be. We fight for our points. It's not that there's anything, we don't sort problems for others or whatever. We have our own problems, we have our own targets, and we go for them. That's all.
We know that we are going to play against the leader. We are going to play against a team in a high, and even with the problems we have, and we have doubts about everything because we don't know which players are available, but we are going to arrive. We are going to have a team capable of going there and fight for the victory.
And 2 earlier kick-offs today as well. 2 London clubs heading to the south coast. Brighton hosting Chelsea. Arsenal go to Southampton. This morning it's been confirmed Tottenham and England midfielder Eric Dyer has had his appendix removed. He's expected to return to training in the new year. Yesterday Spurs beat Burnley 1-0 to keep up pressure on Liverpool and Manchester City at the top of the table. That's all looking rather exciting in Scotland, where Celtic and Rangers are both hoping to finish the day at the top of the Premier League. Kilmarnock went a point clear of Celtic with their win over Dundee yesterday. But the Scottish champions have 3 games in hand, starting away at Hibernian this lunchtime. And as you can see from that, they are already a goal down. 1-0 the score there. Should that scoreline stay the same, a win for Rangers over Hamilton later will see them go top. In Rugby Union, Edinburgh are hoping to do the double over Newcastle Falcons today and boost their chances of finishing top of their group and guarantee a place in the Champions Cup quarter-finals. In the same pool, 4th place Toulon travel to Montpellier. Already underway, Leicester Tigers host group leaders Racing 92, who remain unbeaten. And it's looking like it will remain that way this afternoon with that scoreline the way it is. Katie Taylor produced a dominant display in New York to beat Eva Wallström and successfully defend her IBF and WBA World Lightweight titles. Taylor won each of the 10 rounds at Madison Square Garden to finish her opponent, who herself is a world champion but in a different weight division. Meanwhile, Canelo Alvarez is now world champion in 3 weight divisions. That's after he beat Liverpool's Rocky Fielding at Madison Square Gardens as well earlier this morning. Fielding was knocked down 4 times before the fight was stopped in the 3rd round.
I never shied away from the challenge. The phone call I got was Canelo wanted to fight you, so I said yeah, Madison Square Garden, and it's been a great week. Met some great people. You know, I dare to be great. I lived the dream, but you know, I'll come again. I'll come back.
England's hockey players have had to settle for 4th again at the World Cup in India. They played Australia in the bronze medal match and they were totally outclassed. It finished 8-1. The Aussie goal scorer Tom Craig with a hat-trick out there today. Later, Belgium, in fact, is just getting underway. The anthems taking place in India at the moment. Belgium, who beat India in the semi-final, will play the Netherlands starting in the next few minutes. And Olympic bronze medalist Bianca Walkden successfully defended her title at the Taekwondo World Grand Slam. The 2-time world champion says she'll be spending her prize money on buying another pizzeria, while Lauren Williams, who also won gold in her weight division earlier, plans to pay off her parents' mortgage. What would you do with that £54,000? I'll leave you to think about that for the rest of the afternoon, because that is all the sport for now. You can find out more on all those stories, including that Hockey World Cup final between Belgium and the Netherlands, on the BBC Sport website. That's bbc.co.uk/sport. And I'll be back with more tomorrow.
All right, Kat, many thanks indeed.
Thank you.
Now, let's see what the weather's doing. It's been pretty miserable this weekend. Chris Fawkes has got the latest forecast for us.
Yes, indeed I do, Ben. The weather's cheering up, though, today compared with what we had yesterday when Storm Deirdre did its worst. Now, we had probably the most dangerous stuff yesterday was the freezing rain. This was liquid water that's got a temperature below 0, freezes on impact. Just look how skiddy and icy it is here in Beverley on the roads and on the pavements. And we had significant problems yesterday across northern England and parts of Scotland with this stuff. Multiple accidents reported, for example, on the M74 and also the A19, amongst others. Heavy snow for northern Scotland, and we had a top gust of 79 miles an hour in West Wales, Aberdaron. Now, looking at the week ahead, high pressure is sat just to the west of the UK. That's going nowhere fast at all, and it's going to trap this area of low pressure to the northwest of us. We get these west-southwesterly winds, so temperatures will be running quite close to average, perhaps a little bit above average for much of the week ahead. Satellite picture today shows an area of cloud working into western areas, and this is bringing some wet weather. The heaviest rain is going into Wales. We've seen some wet weather in southwest England and showers both in northwest England and the southeast of England as well. The best of any dry and bright weather across central and eastern England, eastern areas of Scotland with some sunshine, quite a bit of cloud for Northern Ireland, but mainly dry. Now, overnight tonight, our band of rain pushes eastwards across England before clearing, and then we get a ridge of high pressure building in. The winds will fall light, and it's going to be a cold night with some patches of frost and maybe 1 or 2 fog patches as well to start off Monday morning. So there is the ridge of high pressure. To the northwest, we've got a weather system approaching, and that will bring some strong winds to northwestern areas as we go through the afternoon. So for Monday, any fog clearing, should be a bright start to the day. Most of us will see some morning sunshine before cloudier across western areas. Wet weather pushes into the west, and we'll have some strong winds, probably gales before the end of the day. It will be relatively mild though across western areas, with temperatures pushing up to 12 degrees. Through Monday night and into Tuesday, our weather front just edges a little bit closer, so turning wet for Northern Ireland. This slow-moving weather front will bring some heavy rain on Tuesday. After all the wet weather we've seen over recent weeks across Wales and the southwest, we could see some localised surface water flooding issues. but it will stay on the mild side. Temperatures 10 to 12 degrees Celsius for Tuesday. On into Wednesday's weather forecast, that rain clears away, but we're going to see showers or perhaps some lengthier spells of rain affecting western parts of the UK. The best of the sunshine, central and eastern England, northern and eastern parts of Scotland. Turning a bit cooler, you'll notice, in the north, but still relatively mild in the south with temperatures into double figures. So Deirdre has cleared out of the way, the weather turning milder over the next few days. That's your weather.
Hello again, you're watching BBC News with me, Ben Brown. Our latest headlines. The International Trade Secretary, Liam Fox, has said if it's not possible to find a way to operate the Irish backstop acceptable to the UK and the EU, then Parliament will have to decide on the alternatives. After 2 weeks of negotiations, delegates at the UN Climate Conference in Poland reach agreement on how to enforce cuts to carbon emissions. A 5-year-old boy becomes the third victim of the Nottinghamshire house fire which killed a mother and her 8-year-old daughter yesterday. Bad weather is being blamed for contributing to the number of shoppers on British high streets yesterday. Those are our headlines. Now on BBC News, time for the travel show.
Hello and welcome to the Travel Show, coming to you this week from the beautiful Lake District in northern England. We're here to discover all of the hard work that goes into conserving the region, but also coming up on this week's show.
Carmen continues her whistle-stop tour of next year's Rugby World Cup venues in Japan. This time, she's in Osaka.
Ferris wheel. Masugu? Arigato. Okay, she said it straight ahead.
Our global guru Simon is here with tips on how to make it to base camp on Mount Everest. And we find out where ice cream is said to have originated.
New York, Italia.
Its vast lakes and majestic mountains have inspired generations of painters, poets and writers. The Lake District is England's largest national park, and that's where we're starting our show this week. And we're not on our own.
Almost 20 million people annually visit this region, and last year the Lake District was awarded UNESCO World Heritage status, which means it now counts among wonders like the Grand Canyon in the US or Machu Picchu in Peru.
That's pretty good company for a region whose steep mountains and picturesque valleys and lakes have been attracting tourists for over 200 years, come rain or shine.
So the great thing about coming at this time of year is the beautiful autumnal colours filling up the landscape. The bad thing is the autumn weather.
Liam Pryor is a local ranger. UNESCO's recognition is filling people like him with great pride, but this will inevitably add to an existing concern.
In total then we're talking hundreds of thousands of people each year coming up to these mountains. That must have an impact on the land.
Absolutely. Every footfall causes a little bit of erosion. And the landscape would be a much different place if that erosion wasn't tackled.
Thankfully, Fix the Fells formed to tackle the erosion. Every week, whatever the weather, volunteers gather to maintain and repair the mountain paths, fix walls and protect the unique landscape. And there's plenty to keep them busy.
You can actually see here that the original width of the path is about a metre wide, and yet now it stretches almost to 3 metres, and that's been caused by erosion from footfall, people stepping off the path to walk around rocks, and also rainfall off the mountain.
Making the preservation work all the more urgent. And it's tough work. Cleaning the drains and rebuilding the path edges needs stamina, plenty of elbow grease and good shovel skills.
Alright chaps, what's happening here?
So basically what we want to do is just extend this drain out a little bit, but just to give it a little bit more flow when it gets into heavy rain.
Okie dokie.
Good to go?
Let's do it.
I think this is actually the first time I've ever used a shovel. So.
You're doing a great job.
Barry and his dog Hamish have also been volunteering for the past 10 years.
Oh, you're looking a bit wet and miserable.
He comes out most times. Hamish has been doing it since he was a pup. The things that keep me coming back are, well, firstly, there's a huge amount of camaraderie amongst the whole group. Another reason is I've walked on these fells for, well, years, all my life basically, and it's a way of putting something back.
As the sky clears, I leave the volunteers to their hard work and take up Liam's offer of a tour up Scafell Pike. At 978 metres, it's England's highest mountain.
I can't imagine how much labour must have gone into putting this pathway up the side of the mountain.
Well, there's been a footpath team in Wasdale since 1988, so every year since then work has gone into this path to create the sustainable line.
So that's what, 30 years of hard labour?
More than 30 years of hard labour, yeah.
It's more than a jail sentence.
It's amazing.
But here the hard labour is rewarded by stunning views.
It may not be the best of weather today. It's a bit misty out there, but you can still see out to this incredible view over the lake. And it's not surprising that so many people are drawn here all year round.
We march on, and after a couple of hours we finally reach the top. Well, the plateau lying just below it.
So, where is the peak?
Oh, so these are crags at Scafell Pike with the summit just nestled in behind.
And I believe there's some rock climbing history here, right?
Yeah, sure. It's the home of rock climbing in England. A lot of people came and tested their skills on these crags in the late 1800s.
But these seemingly eternal rocks have also lived through world events. After the climbers came the soldiers.
After the First World War, Scafell Pike was gifted to the National Trust as a war memorial and as a place for returning servicemen and women to come and get away from it all. And we'd encourage everybody to show that kind of respect when they're ascending Scafell Pike.
Conservation efforts in the Lake District aren't just focused on the landscape. Up until a few years ago, you could catch glimpses of large golden eagles towering over these summits. But now the only place you can find them is here, at Dee and Daniel's place.
This is Phoenix.
Hello, Phoenix, but you're not a phoenix.
The golden eagle is really the icon of the Lake District in terms of its natural wilderness. Sadly, the last golden eagle died about 2 or 3 years ago.
Wow.
In the wild. So this little chap is being trained up to fly, free fly in the lakes, so people can still see a wild golden eagle in its natural environment.
The Lake District is not immune to the global decline in biodiversity, and Dee and Daniel's ecotourism business introduces people to animals which are or were once part of this region's wildlife. All with the hope of fostering further respect for these creatures and their habitat. Another animal you're no longer able to spot in the wild here in the Lake District is the wolf. In fact, the last one is believed to have been killed way back in the 13th century, just up the road from here. But for Dee's hybrid wolves, whose pedigree is part wolf, part dog, it's time for walkies.
Put your hand all the way through the leash and grip like this, and then we'll just take him for a walk. All right, taking a wolf for a walk. We want to show people that they're not the big bad wolf. The demonisation of Hollywood and fairy tales isn't actually true. And although it's not a suitable place in the Lake District to have wolves anymore, we can use that to show people that actually coexistence with the predators we've got left is really, really vitally important.
And as the sun goes down, my time here is up. But Dee tells me there's one thing I've got to take part in to become a true member of the pack.
There's lots of different wolf howls. The one that we're going to do is a family bonding howl, and this bonds the pack unity. It's our version of singing "We Are Family," and I've got all my wolf pack around me. Oh.
That was some good howling, boys. Nicely done.
Time now to leave the Lake District behind and find out about a tasty treat that's a traditional favourite over in Iran.
شما می‌دونید که بستنی اولین بار کجا ساخته شده؟
راستش نه نمیدونم. نیویورک؟ یعنی نیویورک. ایتالیا؟ فکر کنم ایتالیا بوده.
ما الان در یکی از ساختارهای معماری شاخص